When my dad told me you'll never make me proud, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just looked at him, smiled, and quietly packed my things. He thought my silence meant surrender, but it was the sound of me starting over. And when he finally saw my face on TV years later, he didn't smile because he was proud, he smiled because he finally realized what he lost. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. My name is Lila, I'm 30 years old, and this is the story of how my father's words broke me, shaped me, and eventually, made me stronger than he could ever imagine. Growing up, my dad, Robert, was the kind of man everyone respected, the town's big-shot construction company owner. Everyone called him Mr. Reeves, the self-made man who believed success came from grit, sweat, and early mornings on the job site. He built a good life for us, but it came with a price: his approval. And that approval wasn't free. He wanted a son who'd take over the business, who'd carry his name on trucks and blueprints. Instead, he got me, the girl who spent her evenings writing stories and recording fake news segments on a tape recorder instead of visiting job sites. "You live in your head too much," he'd say, shaking his head when I'd tell him I wanted to be a journalist someday. "Dreams don't pay the bills, Lila. You need a real job." At first, I laughed it off. Dad was old-fashioned. I figured he'd come around once he saw how serious I was. But the older I got, the colder he became. Every achievement of mine, top grades, awards, college scholarships, he brushed off as luck. He saved his pride for my brother, Evan, the golden child. Evan joined the family business right after college, and every Sunday dinner turned into a praise session. "Evan closed another deal today," Dad would boast. "That's how you build a life, Lila. With hard work, not journalism." Mom would stay quiet, eyes darting between us, trying to smooth things over. "Your father doesn't mean it," she'd whisper to me after dinner. "He just wants what's best for you." But what's best for me was never what he wanted. After college, I landed a small internship at a local radio station. It didn't pay much, but it was something I loved. The day I told him, I still remember how his face twisted: disappointment, anger, and disgust all mixed together. "A radio station," he scoffed. "So you're gonna talk for a living? That's what I raised you for." I stood there, clutching my folder, fighting back tears. "It's an opportunity, Dad. Everyone starts somewhere." His voice cut through the air like a slap. "Yeah, and most people grow up." That night, I cried until my pillow was soaked. But the next morning, I got up, got dressed, and went to that internship like my life depended on it. At first, it was brutal. Coffee runs, late-night editing, working weekends just to get noticed. I was living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment that smelled like burnt toast. Some days, I'd walk by construction sites, see men in hard hats who reminded me of him, and wonder if he was right. Was I chasing a fantasy? But every time I stepped into that radio booth, put on the headset, and spoke into the mic, something inside me felt alive. It was like for those few hours, I mattered. My voice mattered. Then, one evening, while filling in for a sick co-host, I read a breaking story on air. I didn't think much of it, but the producer pulled me aside afterward. "You've got something, Lila," he said. "A natural voice. We might want to keep you around." That moment lit a fire in me. Over the next few months, I worked harder than ever. I wrote stories that got picked up by local outlets, started getting recognized for my delivery, and one day my producer called me into his office with the biggest smile I'd ever seen. "You ready for TV?" he asked. I blinked. "What do you mean?" He grinned. "Channel 9's launching a weekend news slot. They want someone fresh, authentic." I showed them your clips. "You've got the job if you want it." My heart raced. I wanted to scream, to call my mom, to tell my dad, but then I remembered his words. "You'll never make me proud." That night, I sat alone in my tiny apartment, eating instant noodles, staring at the offer letter. I thought about how many times I'd doubted myself, how many nights I'd replayed every insult he threw at me. And then I smiled because for once, I didn't need his approval. I was finally doing something for me. A week later, I officially started my TV job. My mom called to congratulate me, her voice trembling with pride. But then she said, almost in a whisper, "Your father, he says he's not going to watch. Says TV isn't real work." That stung, but I didn't let her hear it in my voice. "It's okay, Mom," I said. "He doesn't have to watch." Inside, though, I made a promise to myself. He would see me one day whether he wanted to or not. The night before my first live broadcast, I couldn't sleep. I sat by my window, city lights flickering outside, rehearsing my lines over and over. My hands shook, but not from fear, from excitement. Because tomorrow, I'd step into that studio, sit behind that desk, and the entire town including my father would see me. Maybe not as the daughter he wanted, but as the woman he could never break. The first time I saw my face on the monitor in the newsroom, I almost didn't recognize myself. The lights, the mic, the teleprompter, it felt surreal. I wasn't just Lila Reeves, the girl who disappointed her dad. I was Lila Reeves, the journalist. I remember the producer counting down 3, 2, 1 and the red light flicked on. My voice came out steady, calm, professional, but inside, my heart was racing like a drum. The segment went by in a blur. When it ended, the studio erupted in applause. I'd done it. For the first time in years, I walked out of that building feeling like I was standing tall, not shrinking in someone's shadow. A few weeks later, my first feature aired, a local story about a struggling single mother who turned her bakery into a thriving business. The piece went viral online. People praised the storytelling, my tone, my compassion. And then the phone calls started coming in, invitations to guest host, to speak, to cover bigger stories. My name was finally starting to mean something. But you know what the funny thing was? The first person I wanted to tell was still my dad. I knew he didn't care, or at least that's what he said, but deep down, I think I wanted him to see me and think, that's my daughter. Mom would call every now and then with updates. Your dad watched your interview with the bakery lady, she'd whisper, her voice low like it was some kind of secret. He did? I asked, my chest tightening. He said, you were confident. He didn't say much else, but that's something, isn't it? It wasn't an apology, but it was a crack in his pride. And sometimes that's all it takes for the light to get in. Still, I couldn't let myself rely on that tiny sliver of hope. So I kept working. I hosted late-night shows, filled in for senior anchors, even produced segments that won local awards. I was exhausted most days, but it was the good kind of tired, the kind that comes from chasing something that finally feels right. Then one night, something unexpected happened. It was a Sunday evening, and I was covering a breaking story about a flash flood in a nearby town. The live broadcast ran for hours, and by the end of it, I was drenched, muddy, and completely drained. But when I got home, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Hundreds of notifications, dozens of missed calls, and one message from an unknown number that froze me. Saw you on TV. You did good, kid. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. The number wasn't saved, but I didn't need to. I knew that tone. That short, awkward phrasing. It was my dad. He'd watched. For a moment, I didn't know whether to cry or laugh. My whole life, I'd imagined what it would feel like to hear him say something nice, and now that he did, it just felt strange. Like too little, too late. I typed a reply, but deleted it before sending. What was I supposed to say? Thanks for finally noticing I exist? No. Silence was better. I'd learned that silence said more than any words could. A week later, Mom called. Your father's been watching more of your broadcasts, she said softly. He pretends not to care, but I can tell. I wanted to feel proud, but mostly I just felt tired. For years I'd begged for crumbs of validation. Now that I had it, it felt hollow. So I poured everything into my career. My team started calling me the storm chaser because I'd cover any story, no matter how tough. And slowly the local network wasn't enough. Bigger outlets started calling. When I got the offer to host a national morning show, I didn't hesitate. It was the kind of opportunity that changes your life, and I was ready. The day before my first national broadcast, I flew home to visit Mom. I hadn't seen my parents in almost 3 years. The house looked the same, but smaller somehow. When I walked in, Mom hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. But Dad, he barely looked up from the newspaper. Didn't think TV people had time for family, he said dryly. I forced a polite smile. Hi, Dad. He grunted. So, they actually pay you for talking now? I felt the old anger rising, but I swallowed it. Yeah, I said calmly. They do. And I'm good at it. He didn't respond, but I saw a flicker in his eyes. The same pride he'd been withholding all those years was finally trying to find its way out, but his ego held it back. That night, I lay awake in my old bedroom, staring at the ceiling, surrounded by remnants of who I used to be. The girl who wanted to be seen. The girl who thought she wasn't enough. But I wasn't that girl anymore. The next morning, I left early. My mom hugged me again, whispering, he's proud, Lila. He just doesn't know how to say it. Maybe she was right. But at that point, I didn't need his words. My actions had already said everything. The morning of my national debut came faster than I expected. The studio was buzzing, cameras, producers, bright lights. I sat at the news desk, hair and makeup done, my notes in front of me. My co-anchor smiled and whispered, "Ready?" I smiled back. "I've been ready my whole life." The red light blinked on. "Good morning, America," I began, my voice steady, warm, confident. As the show went on, the producer gave me a thumbs up. Viewers were loving it. My name started trending online. And even though I didn't want to admit it, I hoped my dad was watching. Hours later, after we wrapped, my phone buzzed again. "Mom, he's been sitting in front of the TV all morning," she said. "Didn't say a word. Just watching you. Lila, I think he's proud. I really do." For the first time in years, I smiled without bitterness. Not because I needed his pride, but because I'd finally learned how to stand tall without it. But fate wasn't done with me yet. Because the next time I saw him, it wouldn't be through a screen. It would be in person, and the world would be watching. I'll never forget the night everything came full circle. It was the annual National Media Excellence Awards, one of the biggest nights in the industry. My morning show had been nominated for Best New Broadcast, and even though I told myself it didn't matter whether I won or not, deep down it did. Not for fame, not for validation, but for that quiet, personal victory that comes after years of being told you'd never make it. When I arrived at the event, flashes from cameras lit up the entrance. My heart pounded as I walked the red carpet, wearing a sleek navy gown that shimmered under the lights. For once, I didn't feel like I was pretending to belong. I did belong. As I greeted other journalists, my producer came up to me, excitement in his voice. "Lila, you're not going to believe this. Reeves Construction just came on as one of our gold sponsors for the event." I froze. Reeves Construction, my father's company. My breath caught in my throat. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Yeah. Their CEO's here tonight. Robert Reeves, right." It felt like the ground shifted beneath me. My father was here at my night, surrounded by the very people he used to mock. I didn't know whether to laugh or walk out. For a moment, I thought about slipping away quietly. But then, something inside me, something that had grown stronger over the years, whispered, "No. Stay. He needs to see this." So, I stayed. The ceremony began, elegant and grand. People clapped, laughed, sipped champagne. My category came near the end, and as each award passed, I could feel my pulse building. My producer gave my hand a reassuring squeeze. And then, the host said the words that made time stop. "And the award for Best New Broadcast goes to Lila Reeves, Morning Focus Live." For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. The applause washed over me like a wave, and I finally stood, smiling, tears threatening to spill. I walked to the stage, my heels clicking softly on the floor, and accepted the award. As I turned to the audience, the lights were blinding, but even through them, I could see his face. My father, sitting at a table near the front. His eyes wide, his lips parted slightly, not in anger, not in pride, in disbelief. For years he'd told me I'd never make it. Now he had to sit there and watch me be celebrated for everything he said wasn't real work. I smiled, adjusted the mic, and took a breath. When I first started out, someone told me I'd never make anyone proud doing what I loved. I began. The crowd went still. But I learned something important, that the only person you really need to make proud is yourself. Because when you believe in your voice, it's amazing what that voice can do. Applause thundered through the room, but my eyes stayed on him. His head was down now, his hand on his glass, avoiding my gaze. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel like a little girl begging for her father's approval. I just felt free. After the ceremony, as the crowd thinned out, I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned, and there he was, my dad. He looked smaller somehow, older. The proud, stern man who used to tower over me now seemed uncertain. He cleared his throat. "You looked good up there." I nodded. "Thanks." He shifted awkwardly. "You've done well for yourself." It was the closest he'd ever come to saying "I'm proud of you." But instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt something softer, pity, maybe. Or closure. "I did what I had to do," I said gently. "Even when you didn't believe in me." He sighed, glancing away. "I didn't understand back then. I thought you were wasting your time. Guess I was wrong." I smiled faintly. "Yeah, you were." He chuckled a small, almost ashamed laugh and looked down. "Your mom's been telling everyone to watch you in the mornings. She says you brighten her day." That made me smile for real. She always believed in me. He nodded, guilt flickering across his face. "Yeah, she did." We stood there in silence for a while. The air between us was thick not with anger, but with years of things left unsaid. Finally, he said quietly, "You've made me proud, Lila." For a moment, my chest tightened. It was the line I'd waited half my life to hear. But now that it was here, it didn't hold the power it once did. I met his eyes and said softly, "I was proud of myself long before you said that." He blinked, stunned, and then slowly nodded. "Guess I deserved that." I smiled, turned, and walked away, not out of spite, but peace. Because I didn't need to prove anything anymore. The next morning, my picture was everywhere, headlines calling me the voice of modern journalism. The award had catapulted my career to a whole new level. And tucked between all the press photos and interviews was one shot that made me pause. It was a candid photo of me on stage, holding the award, with my dad sitting in the audience behind me watching, clapping faintly. The caption beneath it read, "Lila Reeves, celebrated journalist," with her proud father in attendance. When I saw it, I laughed softly. Because the world finally saw what he could never admit, that I was worth being proud of. And maybe, deep down, he knew it too. That night, I placed the award on my mantle and stood quietly in my apartment, looking out at the city lights. For years I'd chased his approval, thinking it would fill the hole he left. But standing there with everything I'd built on my own, I realized something powerful. I didn't need to make him proud. I just needed to make myself free. And that's the sweetest revenge of all.